Hello, and welcome to Honest Information for Powerful Lives. Tonight we're talking about parenting again. There are so many aspects to parenting, so hang up, there's going to be a lot of these. But one of the first things that you need to do in order to be a good parent is you need to see your child like God does. You need to make sure that when you look at your child, you see them in the same way that God does. Now, what do I mean by that? Because you look at your child all day long, right? And you know exactly what your child looks like. And you feel like that's all you can see in your head. You go to bed at night and you see this kid. But what do you see? Do you only see the yelling, the screaming? Do you only see how he looks like his dad or her dad? Or how maybe she is starting to show traits that are like you? Well, those are all good things, and all of that is part of being a parent and holding that little one and kind of feeling like maybe it might be a mini me, which we'll talk about that later because you have to separate and realize that they are a different person from you. But what are you missing? What am I trying to say with this? What are you missing in that sometimes you may not see your child like God sees them? So let's take an example. Let's suppose your child is just, maybe they're 2, and I don't believe in the terrible 2s. I think they're just kids that are trying to grow a little bit and we don't understand where they're at, and we can fix those terrible 2s. But let's say your 2-year-old is on the floor just pitching a fit and screaming because the color or the crayon isn't coloring his picture right. Now, how do you see that? You may see it and say, "Ugh, this strong-willed child, I just don't know if I'm going to make it through this, and I got to get a hold of him. I got to control him so I don't have these kind of outbursts." Well, you do need to train them so that they don't have that outburst. But first, look at them like God does. If you know anything about the 12 people that God called, it was 12 different personalities. None of them were the same. And the most passionate and the person that Jesus said, "I will build my church upon this rock," was Peter. And Peter was an explosive, quick-tempered, hot-talking, powerful thunderbolt man who made good decisions a lot of the times, but man, he had a lot to learn to control that temper. So when you look at your child pitching a temper tantrum, yes, you've got to take control of that, and if you take my discipline class, I'll tell you how. But you need to see what's happening and ask yourself this question. Does God want that child to be passionate? Does God want that child to be strong? Does God want that child to be a rock for everyone around him that they can build upon and grow with? And then you ask yourself, okay, God, you gave him this personality. Now show me how to mold it for good. How to take what feels like is chaos and mold it into something good. Let's say your kid brings out pots and pans every time you're turning around. They're emptying the cabinet on the floor and they're banging on them. And to you, it seems like noise. And to you, you want to go grab them up and threaten them within an inch of their life if they ever pull out a pot and pan again. How does God see that child? Do they have rhythm? Do they seem joyful when they're making this noise? What if when they're 10, 12, 14, they develop this great musical talent? Do you want to start now to take that passion and that joy for what seems like a train wreck to you, but to take what they may be hearing in their head and say, how can I mold that? How can I help that grow? Now, the reason I'm using that example is my youngest, Ken, did that very thing. And he was always blowing into some tube or banging on pans or doing anything that kept his hand. He was a drummer from the age of 1, always beating on something. And I tried for a while just to get him to be quiet. I needed quiet. Kids aren't concerned about quiet, but parents are. We need quiet sometimes. And I will remember very well when I was washing dishes one day and praying for all 3 of my kids. And I felt like, I didn't hear an audible voice, but I felt like the words that were coming into my head were from God. And he said, I want this child for my service. And I sat down on the floor with bubbles on my hands, and I prayed for all 3 of my children, especially for my youngest. And then I made God a promise. I said, okay, I will do whatever money will allow to prepare him so that he can be what you want him to be. And I'm proud to say he went into music, and he has a master's degree in choral directing, and he is a fabulous musician. Look at your child in the way that God does. Look for their abilities. What can they do that other people can't? Or if it's a negative thing for you, ask yourself, how could we mold this so that 10 years later it becomes a good thing? What about intelligence? You know, we always have a problem with the kid that says, well, why? Well, why? I don't know why. Usually that's a highly intelligent child who feels like they need to know everything. What about their personality? Maybe it's a different personality from yours, so there's a little bit of clash. But what could that child do with a different personality than what God made you to do? What are the strengths? Maybe your child is super quiet. But then when there's a rift between other siblings, that's the child that gets in there and tries to bring everybody together. That's a terrific strength that needs to be promoted. What about the possibilities? You can look at every area of your child's personality, abilities, intelligence, whatever, and all of a sudden you begin to see these possibilities that could happen later on. My oldest son, Jamie, I caught him one day. I told him, go back and clean your bedroom. And I went back to find him sitting on the floor, and he had my camera in pieces. And I was like, oh no. And something hit me, said, ask him why. Remember our last talk where I said, ask why? So I was about ready to scream. And I said, Jamie, why are you doing this? You got my whole camera taken apart. And he looked up at me like I had just asked the dumbest question in the world. And he said, Mom, Give me a second. I just about got it figured out how this thing takes a picture. And I said, well, just see if you can put it back together. Would you believe that that 10-year-old put that camera back together and it worked perfectly? Possibilities. And now he is an award-winning videographer and photographer. Possibilities. Talents. That was a talent, what he did. My daughter had her own personalities and talents and abilities. She was the one in the family that could bring everybody together, that could smooth everything. When she's not there, we're all just a little bit of a mess without her. And she's been that way for a long time. So I would encourage you, before you think that you have to punish or you have to discipline, which we do, that's part of guiding that child. But before you do that, ask yourself, what was God's intent for this child? With all of their faults and all of their good points, how was God expecting this to blend together to make a terrific human being? When you see your child like God sees them, as this bundle of pluses and minuses, but this fantastic, imaginative, creative, wonderful being that is going to grow up and become something fabulous and is going to grow up and change the world around them because of how God made them. When you see them like that, then all the discipline and all the work you have to do feels lighter because you, the parent, become a partner with the Creator, and you know that your child is going to be better because of it. I promise. So have a wonderful day with your children. God bless you, and thank you for listening. And don't forget, your child is a unique, wonderful creation from God. So treat him that way. Goodbye.